There's been a lot of talk about digital sovereignty over the years, and what we've so far seen in 2025, those discussions are certainly beginning to heat up. But what exactly is digital sovereignty, and what impact does it have on enterprise IT? Hello, my name is Rahil Nasir, and I'm a research director with IDC. Welcome to today's discussions that I'll be moderating. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to enter into full screen mode, if you click on the media player and you see that arrow in the top right-hand corner, just click that arrow and hopefully you should be able to get into full screen. And also, I'm sure that you've got questions as well. So please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll do our very best to answer as many as we can. And to help with all of that, I'm joined by an expert panel of guests. So let's meet them. If I could start with you, Rahim, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Rahil. Hello, everyone. My name is Rahim Abdur. I am the technical product owner at Co42 for the Signature Private Cloud, a sovereign private hyperscale cloud platform. A bit about Co42, we're based out of Abu Dhabi, a part of the G42 family of companies. We are a MENA regional player delivering sovereign national scale AI infrastructure and hyperscale cloud platform capabilities. If I may add, most recently, Stargate UAE was announced by G42 and its international partners in Abu Dhabi in the presence of His Highness the President of UAE and the President of the United States. Stargate is a 5 gigawatt AI compute cluster at the new UAE US AI cluster in Abu Dhabi. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Servane, if I could turn to you now.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Servane Augier. I'm in charge of public affairs for NIMspot, who is a quite new player in France for sovereign cloud solutions. So we'll tell you a bit later about what we comprehend with that term.
Thanks very much. Nicolas, hello.
Yeah, thanks. Nicolas Dufour, the strategy director of Cloud Temple, which is another trusted and sovereign cloud service provider like Servane and NIMspot. So we'll discuss about that a lot today together.
Superb. Thank you for that. And Mark, hi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rahil. I'm Mark Ransford. I'm a public sector strategist here at Ionos in Germany. We are a public cloud services provider, and I'm proud to be here.
Thanks very much. You're most welcome. And Francisco.
Hello, thanks Rahil for having us here today. Francisco Romero, I'm the Sovereign Cloud Coordinator here in Tieto Evry, providing infrastructure and IT services for societies in the Nordics. Great to be here. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much for that. And Thomas?
Yes, hi, here is Thomas Teroni. I'm the founder of Phoenix Technologies, sovereign AI hyperscaler out of Switzerland. More than 20 years experience in sovereign cloud providing here from Switzerland.
Great stuff. And finally, but by no means least, Michela.
Hi, Rahel, thank you. So my name is Michele Cito. I work for Red Hat, where I am responsible of the cloud and service provider business across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I actually wanted to take the opportunity to thank all of our partners for being with us today and the attendees today have decided to invest some time with us to listen about sovereignty.
Here, and welcome to you all. So I think the best place to begin is really at the beginning, because whenever I have conversations about digital sovereignty, the first question, as I'm sure you always hear, is, what do you mean? IDC has been conducting research into digital sovereignty for a good number of years now. And it's a multifaceted concept that I think works at different levels. So we talk about sovereignty, for example, at the geopolitical level, where you talk about the protection of critical national infrastructure. We also talk about sovereignty as it's applied to supply chains and also assurance sovereignty as well, because that brings in this important idea of resilience. But the key focus for us, and these are the areas that the IT industry, I think, has direct responsibility for us. So the three key areas that we focus on are data sovereignty, operational sovereignty, and then technical sovereignty. And ultimately, when we think about digital sovereignty at a broad level, it's all about digital self-determination for governments, for organizations, and also for individuals. And I think that means giving data owners total control over how and where their data are managed, stored, and then processed by service providers. But that's what IDC is seeing. So, Mark, if I could start with you, for example, because I know defining digital sovereignty is something that you've recently posted about. How does IONOS see it?
Yeah, for sure. For us, I guess digital sovereignty means an emancipation towards, strategic autonomy, just in order to secure futures, let's say, economic or added value in a digitized world. So emancipation for more self-determined, independent action in the future, in a time where digital services are all about.
Thank you for that. Raheem, I want to turn to you because when we talk about digital sovereignty, usually Europe tends to hog the headlines here. You know, it dominates this market, but it's something that we're seeing across all regions. And as somebody who's based over in the Middle East, I wondered what dynamics you were seeing and whether or not those definitions are also chiming with you.
Thank you. Yes, so in today's volatile geopolitical climate, right? So digital sovereignty has essentially evolved from a compliance checkbox to a strategic imperative, right? And the customer behavior we've been observing here in UAE and across the region are essentially customers coming in and their requirements are towards sovereign infrastructure, right? And how we're solving that essentially by providing products across private clouds as well as on public clouds through a partnership with Microsoft, for example, in this case, to cover all the three pillars of sovereignty you've described across data residency, right, technology, as well as through operations, right? So if I may just expand on this, we've got the private cloud solution wherein it essentially checks all those three boxes, right, through data sovereignty, data residency, technology, as well as operational sovereignty, because it's operated from within the nation, yeah. But then we also have products on Microsoft Azure Cloud, which we call Insight, which allows our customers, based on their data classification of data that is less sensitive, to go to that cloud, and we provide a tool set and a compliance mechanism for customers to push policies, to report on compliance and ensure that they are under those regulations reporting compliance. So that's how we see it. This is essentially us empowering our customers to retain control over their data while they're accelerating innovation across public clouds as well as private clouds.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned those sort of deployment options as well, and I think we want to get into that a little bit later on, but sort of like continuing with the dynamics of the market, I think one of the things that we always say is that the French market really stands head and shoulders above everybody else when it comes to those calls for digital sovereignty. And starting with you, Servane, if I could, what makes France different when you think about the dynamics that you see in other regions and in other markets across Europe?
I'm not really sure if... Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, so Nicholas, I'll come to you after Servane, if that's okay.
Dear Servane, start.
Okay, I just wanted to say we're not really different from the other part of the world in that aspect that 80% of the market, of the cloud market, is within the GAFAM. So it's something quite new that people are realizing, that there are huge needs for this digital sovereignty for cloud services. And the sense of advance that we can have is regarding the qualification required to provide confidence in cloud. So we have with the ANSSI, the French National Agency for Security of the IT, which has elaborated a referential called SecNum Cloud for security, digital security in cloud. And that's very much in advance, and it's a very strong level to provide confidence to the customers. So with that, we aim, and we have a few of us in France aiming to be able to provide services for sensitive data, so that even though 80% of the market is already within the GAFAM, the 80% that still remain on-premise can now move to the cloud with confidence and in sovereign clouds.
So, Nicholas, I will turn to you now, because one of the things that's interesting that Servane said that, that there aren't any specific, if you like, key differentiators that separates France from other countries within Europe. But would it therefore, in your opinion, be wrong to characterize the driver for France initially being very politically motivated? And I say that as opposed to a market in Germany, which I think is, and Mark, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but which is very motivated by security concerns, for example. So I make those two distinctions. When we think about France, we think it very politically motivated when it comes to digital sovereignty.
Yes. You want to answer, Servane, or add something?
No, say I complete after what Nicolas, go on.
Okay. So we have two levels in France. As Servane said, we have kind of justice of the peace with ANSSI, which deliver this sovereignty, because sovereignty is in the qualification. Okay, it's a clear definition for France who is sovereign or not. Okay, this is the first level. The level we discuss also now with all we know about the geopolitical environment at this moment, it's another spirit of sovereignty. It's the way to have data and core of the information system deployed on mastered technology. In fact, sovereignty now in France, like in Europe, is this kind of art to choose its technical dependencies, not independencies, to choose its kind of art, okay? And as I was when I was a little bit younger, it's a question of architecture now. It's not a question only of sovereignty like ANSSI delivered the qualification. It's a question of architecture sovereignty. And we have to find a way to hybrid the solution for our customer to gain the maximum value for them, working with a kind of balance with the hyperscaler and the clouder like us. That's the way in France the subject of sovereignty is becoming.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So if I may complete, if you don't mind, Brave, if I may complete on the political idea that you had, that French politics are very keen on sovereignty and very pushing. Well, that's quite true, actually. If you consider that in France, the government has elaborated a rule saying cloud is a center for the project for the administrations. And if they want to go to the cloud, if they want to go to the cloud with sensitive data in their project, they have to use sovereign clouds, which means sovereign and confidence clouds, which have the ANSSI qualification that we talked to you about. So there is a strong input from the government to say, okay, it's important to protect the data. And it's very much for the two aspects, which is legal sovereignty, which means not being submitted to the external laws like Cloud Act or FISA, Surveillance Act. That's very important. But the second aspect, which is very strong now, which is very much related to the geopolitical circumstances, it's about choosing dependencies or trying to avoid very strong dependencies.
Yeah, and I think we need to get into the drivers very shortly. But just to finish off on what sovereignty means for individual markets, and it's interesting, Thomas, you were talking about how you've been looking at sovereignty for a good number of years, a couple of decades now, in Switzerland. What does it mean to your organization, to your customers, when you talk about digital sovereignty? Is it something that organizations are pretty familiar with? How's it working where you are?
Yes, there's often it will be sought that since we are based in Switzerland, that we understand about sovereignty in a IT environment, the same thing as the political sovereignty in Switzerland. So, and of course, this is not the case. So, digital sovereignty or sovereignty in general, we understand from a technology point of view, as well as for our clients, it's that I can decide by myself about the full stack. So I call it all the time the full stack sovereignty. It starts already at the data center, the ownership of the data center, the ownership of the hardware, and also, of course, the company with the ownership that is running the cloud at the end. So this is basically the full stack then, where the client says, I want to have a sovereign solution from Switzerland. So, but it is not limited to Switzerland, of course. So it is also a lot of clients from outside of Switzerland that trust to the general setup of the sovereignty. And the very last point at the end of the chain is, of course, then the government. So since we are doing it in Switzerland, you have a very trustful environment per se when you are here located for that kind of sovereignty.
Right, okay. Francisco, I wanted to turn to you about what you're seeing in the Nordics and you know, as well as the definition of what it means for you. I'm also seeing some serious moves as far as the drivers are concerned. And I want to try and talk a little bit about the drivers. When we've done our research at IDC, this idea of geopolitics, although it's been grabbing the headlines, you know, for the last few years, when you think about digital sovereignty, you know, you read about EU versus US, and I think that's been a distraction. But of course, this year it's now coming up to the top of the agenda as well. And especially, you know, where we see, for example, in the Danish market, they've come up with their own social media platform. They're trying to get more and more away from the US providers. What are the dynamics that you see in your region, in Northern Europe?
Yeah, so I think the Nordics are interesting because the approach to regulation, if you want, is very different from country to country. So in Finland, you will have a more centralized approach to regulation, where there is a clear set of requirements. They are not necessarily called sovereign cloud because there isn't a universal definition of sovereign cloud anywhere, as far as I know, but it's close to requirements that you would expect for certain workloads, certain applications, and so on. Whereas in Sweden and Norway, it's a bit more decentralized. So local administrations have their own versions and requirements, and they are not the same across the country. So it varies a bit from country to country, but of course, all those regulations drive the need of cloud solutions outside the hyperscalers, be that for the data privacy, be that for the data isolation. And I think that what is raising now with the recent change in the geopolitical situation is that much more than before, the organizations, especially in public sector, are concerned what happens with my data, right? What is the what can happen if the data is on an American cloud? You know, we have seen decisions made by the current administration, which are like, you know, suddenly somebody is removed his access rights to Microsoft accounts. We have seen this in top individuals. And that's, of course, raising the attention in a different level than before. And we will see much more attention, organizations looking for plan Bs. What if? So it becomes, the whole sovereign cloud becomes, like discussed here, a way of empowering the organization to make their own master of their destiny in regards of what happens with their data. And I believe it will be much more in the agenda of the CIOs to build the risk management with sovereign clouds in the picture in a stronger way than before. At least in the Nordics, I see that clearly coming.
It's interesting you just said plan B. Every single conversation I'm having, especially where European provide, this term is coming up all the time. And I'm thinking, is it a term that's being created by the European providers, or are customers really asking for this? And now this is an open question, really, to all of you. I mean, is the end result Europe on top of, and you mentioned the US-based providers, but I would say any extraterritorial cloud provider, be it US, be it from another jurisdiction, is it really now Europe on top? Are we now moving to a situation where you want to end the dominance of those global public cloud providers? And and that's an open question to everyone.
Well, I hope it will be the case, but
I agree exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a wake-up call.
Francisco, let's go with you first, and then Servane, I'm going to come to you.
So I think this is a wake-up call, if you want, but I think it's very much needed. I think European technology arena has been a bit lagging behind for many years, relying on other countries to provide technology. It goes in all levels. And when we talk about sovereign cloud, it's really all the levels that matter, from the physical, tech computing solutions and infrastructure, to the data centers, to the operations, and eventually to the AI of things, right? So I think we need to understand that we should be a bit more independent and benefit from our talent in the same way than our organizations outside Europe are doing for many years. So yeah.
And Servane?
Yeah, I want to say, as I mentioned earlier, 80% of the market share is within the GAFAM. So there is, what you call Plan B, which could be another name for hybrid cloud, is coming tomorrow, but it's not a revolution. So I think we are mainly trying to do that. The new projects are coming on European clouds. So, but we won't get a move from the GAFAM to the European clouds of all the existing ones from one day to the other. I mean, so it's hard to build, and it's going to take time. But if we are there for the new project, if all the new things that the companies are doing, they do with this Plan B, which is having hybrid cloud mainly, then we're going to change to reverse the situation. But last year, they were still gaining market share in France versus the European cloud. So we still have a lot to do to reverse the situation.
If I can add something. Oh, sorry.
Yes, please.
The question is, for me, it's not exactly Plan B. It's a question to balance. The clients will think and will do, choose several clouder, hyperscaler, and sovereign cloud. And they share and they put the workload on all these clouds. So it's not a Plan B. It's what I call an architecture. It's a question of architecture and hybrid architecture. The way is not to work with several clouder, is to give value to the client only. If to give value needs to have sovereign cloud and hyperscaler and other stuff, this is a question of architecture. It's the question of engineers only. We don't meet the target, in fact. The target is value, business value for the clients. And to put data, sometimes either on sovereign cloud or hyperscaler, okay? The way for Europe and France is to have this kind of balance, because as Servane said, we have 80% on GAFAM. So we have the qualities, we have the competence to gain balance with GAFAM and to go at this level, okay? It's what I think deeply.
Yeah, what you call balance. Sorry.
What do you call balance, I think, was the
that's the kind of, because 80%, 20%, it's not balance.
No,
I think we can have 40, 60, for example. That's
what I wanted to say, actually, what you call balance, I would call rather to have an option, actually, to have a choice when choosing a provider. Without options to use a provider, both legally and operationally, feasibly, actually, you have to have these options. That means, first of all, there must be a couple of offerings out in the market beside an oligopoly of hyperscalers. And of course, the feasibility to go there if you want to without sky-high opportunity costs in it. Then you get into this balance situation. In a balanced situation, you are not dependent on a couple of hyperscalers all coming from one geopolitical region, which is, of course, a bit of a mess these days.
It was interesting.
to
So
find the values.
I wanted to turn my attention really to how we use sovereign cloud, because it's interesting. You said plan B was hybrid cloud, and right at the top, Raheem, you were talking about private clouds. How would you advise customer organizations to implement the sovereign cloud? Is there, for example, one size fits all?
This is a great question, right? Started by saying not necessarily. Yeah. When we discuss with our customers, the framework that we use is essentially based on data classification, right? So if the data is classified secret or top secret, right? We advise the customer to go with a sovereign private cloud. And then if the data is less sensitive per se, we have an option which we provide to our customers to go with a hyperscaler cloud along with controls and tool sets that Co42 enables for our customers to ensure that although they might be using hyperscaler clouds, which provides a rich set of cloud services, right? But then they also have this tool set available to them to kind of push the right policies, including things like confidential compute, bring your own keys, dedicated HSM, things of that nature. And then we also provide customers with an option to have a reporting dashboard on their compliance views of how they are doing, right? So this is how we're looking at it and working with our customers on this particular use case of hybrid clouds.
So it's the right workload for the right venue is what you're talking about. And that's the way organizations should really look at it. And it's easier said than done. I think there's a great deal of complexity here, and organizations need to lean more on expert partners like you to help with that classification process in the first place. Is this something you guys are seeing as well?
Oh. When I can agree with Raheem exactly with the HSMs, etc. This is the most important point. If we compare it to the further point with the public clouds, we see it as there is the cloud. You know, this means simply hardware is automated, enabled. So if a client says today I use a cloud, he not knows if it's local, private, or public, or at the end they mean it's fully automated. And the thing you not get from the public clouds, as we know it from the US players, is nothing wrong, but it's simply like the local HSM, the private key management or the hyper-secure storage, and the magic is to make that available in the same way as a $3 virtual machine with 2 clicks, you know. So this is very important. That this is for me not a sovereignty discussion. This point, this is simply, if we want to have more market share, we have to be better, you know, in pricing, in competition, in capabilities, in everything. Sovereignty is maybe a key feature, but we have to be better in the full stack. And I think we will win that race when we are better on the full stack, including everything. So we went the road down to have our own cloud operating system based on open source and our own code. So this means also you can decide by yourself. So we was, example, faster than anyone on the whole market globally by implementing H100 cards into a public cloud because we was able to do it by ourselves. So this is very important at the end. And we can decide by ourselves how long we want to run that.
Yes,
I would add...
Sorry,
yes, Servane.
Let's go, Servane.
Yeah, I fully agree with Thomas that people will go to sovereign cloud only if we provide the value they want to go to the cloud for. I mean, and sovereignty, it's not a cherry on the cake. It's more important than that, but it comes after having provided the services. But we have specific values, I think, as sovereign cloud providers, and probably we all share that. It's about using standards of the market, being reversible, being trustful, being transparent about what we use, so that people are not, what we avoid definitely is vendor locking, which is one of the specialty from the GAFAM. So on top of the services that we have to provide, the value with which we provide them are very important and part of the sovereignty that we push for.
I think we have, yes, Servane. Thanks. Should we work in the same company, dear Servane? What I would like to add is we have two. I really agreed, Thomas, about the kind of the depth of the offer. but we work on two sides also. Open source is a way to be technically independent. And the other way we have to work on that to get this kind of balance. The standard for the, I will say, the famous term also is interoperability. We have to work on standard for the interoperability. It's a major deal challenge that we have to win, because yes, we are several in front of us. We have 2 or 3 or 4 GAFAM. In Europe, we have 100 and several digital actors. So we have to specify interoperability standards apply for everybody in the world, GAFAM and us. And it will be able to gain user experience, be able to use and consume our services like GAFAM services. It's another challenge to win also.
Nicholas, can you just explain to the audience what you mean by GAFAM services?
GAFAM services is all the managed services offered by GAFAM. So it starts by infrastructure up to platform as a service and database service, and now with AES services, all the services that an application needs to use, is each business application, I mean.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, and you mentioned open source, and that's the next thing I want to get into. But before we do that, we're halfway through our session and we haven't mentioned those 2 initials that everybody's talking about, and that's AI, of course. Is there a need for AI workloads to all go on to some kind of sovereign cloud environment? You know, are you seeing that? And if so, what would drive organizations to have an AI workload going into a sovereign environment? And perhaps, Thomas, I could start with you on that.
Yes, the AI workload, it makes it more, let's say, necessary. There's no other option at the end, because there are a lot of cases on the AI cluster. So we have an AI supercomputer here in Switzerland, where the data is at the moment of moving or at the moment of processing unencrypted on the GPU. So you must ensure this isolation at that point. And for most of the clients I know or discussions we have, there's absolutely no option to put such a thing into a cloud. It not needs to be, say, the US cloud, this would be wrong, into a cloud where this isolation is not guaranteed. So this means you maybe think about standard workloads, but we talk here about a police station that is doing an interview with a suspect, you know, and they want to do speech to text while they do the interview. This data cannot land in a public cloud. This is simply impossible in, let's say, not only Switzerland here, everywhere else, I would say. And or if we talk about defense scenarios where you have a drone that needs to communicate somehow, etc. So all this stuff is no option at all to put it whatever 1% risk of unencryption everywhere else. So, and for this kind of solutions, let's say sovereignty at least is like a must-have. And then you have the case, you must ensure that inside of the cloud, so the bring your own key concept is very important, so that also our operators do not have access at all. So the only thing we can do is shut down and put on as a cloud provider. We do not see what's inside, and we can nothing do from outside. And that is very important to understand when we talk about AI and sovereignty. I give you a very last word on it. Sorry for that long speech. The AI agent, if we take a scenario, a very simple, easy scenario, like an AI agent have to book a table at the restaurant on behalf of me. We all think, hey, it's easy. This agent need access to my email to send an email, need access to my credit card to do the booking, need access to the response to my calendar, only to do that one task, you know. So, and now you can ask yourself, if you want to run such an agent that is doing maybe your banking by tomorrow in a secured environment or in an environment that is potentially not on the top of the level. So the workload you're on, even if it's a simple use case like you're booking in a restaurant, already requires in AI basically everything from you. So there's no more an option to not be on the top of the security.
On the notion of security, and it's interesting. So, Francisco, I just wanted to bring you in on this idea that, we're hearing that sovereignty is a must for AI. And a lot of organizations that, when we conducted our research and our surveys, do believe that security, that the reason they want a sovereign cloud in Europe is really to enhance their cybersecurity profile. But of course, sovereignty and security are not the same thing. They're two different things. So really, Francisco, on the idea of, is security and sovereignty one of the things that you're seeing is driving the market? And then this idea that if it's AI, it has to go onto a sovereign cloud. Is that something you agree with?
Partly, yes. So I think the AI in the concept of sovereignty, it's about the data. So we have been talking a lot about sovereignty. It's all about protecting data and making sure that organizations have the opportunity to choose where do they want to put their data and so on. Very often, actually, they don't have a choice. Think about hospitals. The data is in the hospitals very often. Large amount of data from the patient. It's not a choice. They have to have it there because it's about latency. It's about having the applications, having fast access to the data. There is a sovereign access component there in the sense of the privacy of the data and so on. But there is also the pragmatical thing that you need to have the data very close to where you actually need the data. So I think this is the other trend that is affecting a lot the sovereign, and specifically in the AI case is even more true. The fact that the data is growing a lot outside the hyperscaler network. There is a lot of data which is not happening anymore in the hyperscalers, and you need to have infrastructure and cloud-like solutions or infrastructure solutions that host data outside the hyperscalers. When you go to the AI, it's a specific case of that trend, right? Especially in AI, you have lots of data that needs to be processed really quick for advanced applications that is not in the hyperscalers, be that because of the privacy or simply because the data it's required whatever is required. So the AI, in my mind, will drive a lot this because of the data gravity. The AI solution will need to follow wherever the data is rather than putting the data where you have the AI solution. It will not work like that. You need to build AI wherever the data is. And that kind of is inherently a use case for sovereign cloud, in my opinion. So that will drive growth in my mind.
Yeah, and it looks like there's no way. Sorry, Servane, did you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, I was. It was very interesting, but we don't have that same issue in France, for instance, because the GAFAM they are in France mostly. I mean, there is no question of distance. We have the same requirement for hosting mainly health data within sovereign clouds, but it's more because of the data being submitted with the GAFAM to sovereign laws, because we don't have this latency issue actually. So that was interesting from your part of Europe.
Okay.
You don't agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm always agree with you, dear Servane. Just the way I'm speaking, Francisco, is I think a main subject at European level today. It's a way to have a challenge with GAFAM is to put in place what we call digital continuity with edge and far and cloud computing with this continuity about AI, data exchange, and also infrastructure and cloud. This real main market that we have to gain, because hyperscaler will not be very interested by this kind of market. So we have several in France and many actors like Servane and myself. We work about this kind of technology with research company agency to be able to offer this kind of digital continuity for operational data, in fact.
All of this, I think, it's not easy.
I was just saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yes, please.
No, I was about to add that is a very nice with the interoperability you were talking about before. This continuity of data between edge, it's a lot to do with interoperability, and I totally agree what you said before. We should be working a bit more on harmonizing and standardizing that, because the data will flow. It's about how easy we want to make it to happen.
Working
that idea
together.
of interoperability, sorry, Nicola, I just wanted to get on to the idea of interoperability because it leads me on to my next section. So when we've had a look at and asked organizations what they see as the challenges, invariably the two challenges with implementing a sovereign cloud solution are the complexities and the high costs that are involved. But there's also this idea of organizations, certainly in Europe, want to avoid vendor lock-in. And when we think about vendor lock-in, I always think about open source solutions as being a way to avoid that lock-in, because to the idea of interoperability in a sovereign environment, you want to be able to move your data to make sure it's transferable, it's portable, so that you're using the appropriate workload for that data. So that's but it's open source the solution here.
Yeah, I guess in my opinion, I guess that it's quite easy to achieve that, Raheel. First of all, the EU Data Act, which is upcoming, actually will force us all to make us accessible, actually, to have the data flowing from one provider to the other. And there are means at hand, maybe a simple API, an API as simple as spanning all over all other cloud providers out there, making them as accessible in both directions. And of course, excessive containerization. That means that you get away from one special working runtime environment, actually, in order to make things exchangeable. So there are means at hand to achieve that, actually. And there are so many sovereign clouds to address here in Europe, actually, that it is worth to do so to produce this kind of fabric around it, which make the clouds accessible from both directions.
So am I to take it that all my panelists are in agreement here with open source as the way to go as far as sovereignty is concerned? Do we have anybody who might have some doubt about that?
No, Raheel, but I would like to add the perspective from Mina on this, right? So at Co42, we're embracing open source technology as a part of our sovereign cloud strategy, essentially enabling transparency, interoperability, innovation, what we've talked about in the past few minutes, right? So open source, as we all know, brings in the classical advantages of code auditability, right? Avoids vendor lock-in. There's wide support options available, including access to a wide talent pool of individuals, right? That's also important for us to look at as service providers, right? So while we do that, we're also looking at how we're ensuring security, policy enforced environments, right, to mitigate risks, right? So I want to give an example of how we are partnering here with companies like Red Hat, wherein we have actually co-engineered with them a cloud platform to make it hyper-resilient, a private cloud platform I'm referring to, while immensely improving our customer experience, right? So if we just kind of step back and visualize a typical large government entity or a large customer, they'll have workloads starting from the edge, perhaps workload that requires on-premise setups, to private clouds, and then to public clouds, right? We've seen that over and over again in the region here, right? So these open source technologies and partnerships with platform providers like Red Hat, as I mentioned, allows us to offer platforms and tool sets like OpenShift, for example, that allows customers a standard and consistent platform and user experience from edge all the way to hyperscale private and public clouds. I wanted to mention that.
But then, Rahim, what would you say, and this is now me playing devil's advocate, to those people who argue that, okay, great, open source has these advantages, but one disadvantage is the fact that you don't get all the innovation capabilities as you might do with a closed source or a proprietary solution. Great, you can use that, but then what about, if you're using a dedicated custom bespoke solution from a hyperscaler, you're not getting the same innovation potential?
I think this is a great question, and we grapple with this every day. And the way we are approaching at Co42 to this problem is essentially providing that flexibility to our customers to use the right cloud platform addressed to customers' needs, right? As I previously mentioned, if you have a specific use case that that requires a particular customer to go to a hyperscaler cloud, right? We're enabling them by providing the tool set in terms of compliance, in terms of regulation, in terms of reporting, to use that. So we are approaching this from a hybrid angle, right? We want to make sure that we allow the customers to use a platform that suits their needs.
Raheel, maybe I will spend a word here because I feel I've been dragged into the conversation, right, as the open source vendor, right? So
right.
There's also a little bit of a misperception when it comes to innovation, because if we look at history of IT, the biggest innovation has always come from open source, actually, right? So if you look what happened with the operating system, if you look what happened with the container, all of these big innovation have all come out of open source projects, then have been consolidated and made enterprise ready to be suitable for enterprise to adopt. And even if you look at what is happening with AI and the evolution of the AI engines, like open source is playing a massive role in the innovation. So I'm not so sure that open source is slowing down innovation. I believe it might require a little bit to consolidate and make enterprise ready the solution, but it's actually leading innovation in the IT market.
So now, since we've dragged you in as well, Michaela, another thing, and this is another issue, and this is really, I think, this is in the wake, and I'm looking now at you, Mark Neuwirth, when you announced sectors to me. I remember, we were talking about that a few months ago, but in the wake of that announcement, there have been some rumblings in the industry talking about the security aspect of open source and whether or not you can guarantee the security of it. What do you say to those people who might be concerned by the security aspect of open source?
Yeah, what you're meaning is, I guess, the governance factor of open source, which is, of course, the problem. You need to serve to your customers a dependable platform, actually, which is operable for 10 years in the future. So the best thing is to go to, let's say, vendors offering open source offers, such as Red Hat, with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, for instance, or OpenShift, and employ that on behalf of your customer, actually. So you got a serviced open source product, actually, with a long run perspective, actually. And I guess that solves the best of both worlds. And of course, open source software is not secure by itself. Actually, it's always told so, but of course, it doesn't mean that only when the source code is open, actually, it is safe by itself, actually, because you all know that actually it contains hundreds and thousands of software pieces, let's say it this way. So it's not as transparent as it is. So it's good to have a company curating the open source service in the back, so such as Red Hat.
So do we believe that the benefits certainly outweigh any disadvantages here, I think? And, I think at the end of the day, it's a conversation about risk management as well. This is something that I would sort of conclude with later on. But I think, there's always going to be risk involved in any kind of IT deployment. And it's about managing that risk. And I think, is that the way to look at it, really? That, look, we know that there are challenges here, but we can address the challenges. But at the end of the day, what is right for your workload? Is that the way you guys are seeing it?
Yeah, well, we talk about the risk with open source, but we didn't speak about the risk with software vendors. And today, I mean, when we see in France the price rises that some software vendors have had, we usually say that with the open source, you still have risk, but you have one step further of being. I mean, if one day an open source solution gets private again, I mean, you can fork, and you have time to choose and to choose what way you want to go to. Where with the software vendors, I mean, when they come and tell you the prices next year is going to be 20% higher, you just have to cry. So risiko is on both sides. I mean, for us in NIMSpot, we just say with our solution, you don't have to choose between innovation and trust, and that's very important for sovereign cloud to say that it's not a renouncement to innovation. On the contrary, I mean, if we're all working today to provide the high quality of services, innovative services that are going to make life for our customer easy, and because what they want is to have easy access to cloud and to be able not to think about it. I mean, it's not to learn again each time they want to change something.
Yeah, so does that mean, and actually we've had a few questions from the audience, which I think, in the final sort of 10 minutes, we should try and have an answer for some members of our audience. One of them, they're talking about hyperscaler offerings being competitive. So for example, are the sovereign cloud offerings that we're seeing from the likes of Microsoft and Google and AWS is launching later on this year, are those competitive products when you compare them to the solutions you guys offer? For customers, what do you say to that?
Yeah, in general, technology-wise, I mean, it is what is it. It's a fully automated, good technology. Regarding to sovereignty, it resolves nothing at all. It depends at the end at the same page. So the question is regarding to sovereignty is not about the technical solution at the end. It's about that you can do it as a sovereign company by yourself. At the end, it's your IT, your system, your cloud, or your environment at the end. And regarding to that, a lot of questions are open. For me personally, it's more a marketing thing than resolving really and addressing really the topic of self-sovereignty at the end. We see that here in Switzerland clearly.
But that isn't going to result in a wholesale. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was thinking, when you talk about hyperscaler, sovereign cloud, I think the question is, I mean, are we competition? Or, we're talking about the balance act and 50-50. Is it really a competition or not? I mean, well, they fulfill a very relevant use case in regards of IT services for many organizations. Sovereign cloud resolves other use cases, somewhat overlapping, somewhat complementary, but there's an overlapping, but there is also a space where it's only sovereign cloud that can resolve the needs of the customer. So I tend to see them as something that they complement each other. And like Fabian said very much, we are providers. As providers, we offer the customers solutions to manage end-to-end hybrid solution that best fits for the purposes. So I don't think it's either or, it's and together playing, and our role is to make that the consumption and adoption of those hybrid end states as easy as possible. And part of that, of course, is if you have your own sovereign cloud solution to take to the table, it makes the relations for the customer easier because you can deliver the full stack. But it's about complementing the benefits of both sides for the specific use case of the customer. So not competition really, but rather complementing.
That's interesting. Yeah. So plan B really is really still plan A. I mean, we still need to have that cooperation because I think that's the win-win situation for customers.
Yes.
This is how I see it.
What I would like to add is, this kind of hybrid solution it could be seen for our customer as a puzzle, a complex puzzle. It's a complex puzzle. Okay, it's a question of engineer. It's a complex puzzle, but we have all what we have in Europe could be competitive for beyond the hyperscaler, clearly. But we have to build this puzzle, and the way it's the ability to innovate with all this stuff to answer to clients' needs. But it's a real puzzle for the clients at this moment.
I just want to add, Rahil, here, the announcement that Microsoft made 2 days ago, I think, bringing in sovereign hyperscale cloud to Europe with things like local data centers, local ops team, data residency, wherein the customer has now an option to allow access, right? So it's going to make things a bit more interesting now, based on what we just heard in the last 4 minutes.
Yeah, but they haven't put a price tag on it.
Yeah, the term is completely
The words
not
have a
exactly
meaning.
appropriate. Okay.
Yeah.
If I
Everything
may,
is sovereign this time. I do. In the newspaper, I check how many the term sovereignty is published during 1 month. 1,000. Okay, it's the word to use for us, the client, the hyperscaler. Okay, everybody is sovereign at this time.
Vivez was
Microsoft-
sovereignty.
And Microsoft
that
hasn't
brings us
put
to
a
the beginning
price tag
question,
on it
because
already.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark.
Still
go
lacking the price.
ahead. Say that again.
So, yeah, Microsoft has announced quite many things actually, but they haven't put a price tag on it actually. There's no actual price for all their sovereign clouds that they announced. The DDoS cloud over here in Germany, which is announced, the AWS sovereign cloud, they are all announcements and would-be's actually, but they don't have given a price for that actually. And I guess they will demand a surplus on that, on their standard
Okay, right.
price.
We better talk about that on a separate occasion, because I think what I want to talk about is more interestingly. I think, Raheem, you were talking about how, and I think Microsoft have had this footprint before, but this idea. So there has been another question in the chat about, if for data localization, do I need to look for local data centers? And that's an interesting question for me, because when we've asked our survey respondents, what is the number one attribute you look for when you're looking for a sovereign cloud partner or provider? The number one thing they want is a local data center presence. So do we require that? If you are looking for data residency, data localization, do you need a data center in your country of operations?
In Europe, at least, actually. I mean, if you want to be sovereign, I mean, your data can't be operated on the other side of the ocean. You have to have your data remaining in Europe. So you have to have your data center in Europe. It's not sufficient. It's not sufficient at all, but at least it has to remain in Europe. But that you can do also is, I mean, we had that discussion about the data center. The data center has to be in Europe, but the owner of the data center doesn't really matter. I mean, you can't, you won't have a requisition of the data towards the owner of the data center. He can't do anything. So that the place is important, the ownership is not for the data center.
And Servane, Europe includes the UK?
Oh, is UK Europe?
Maybe that's another question for another time as well. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have another hour in front of us. I think we're having a much better relationship nowadays than we used to have last year. So maybe we'll be able to cross the channel at least, if not the ocean.
Okay. Well, look, lady and gentlemen, in the final few minutes, I just want to get some closing thoughts about where you think this is all going. And Raheem, I'm going to start with you. I mean, in Europe, there are moves for organizations, in Germany and in Denmark that we're seeing to, if you like, disentangle themselves from the solutions provided by vendors from outside the region. I'm not going to specifically name the US cloud providers, but anyone outside the regions, it's obviously who I mean. But are you seeing anything like that in your region? Do we need to throw out the Microsofts, the Googles, and the AWSs of the world?
I think this is an interesting one. So the way we're observing, right, the demand, the customer behavior is that the future of sovereignty here, I think, will be shaped by new regulations, perhaps more importantly, strong investments in AI and cloud infrastructure, right, and including regional collaboration. Yeah. What we're seeing here is that there is a need for deep partnerships with companies like Red Hat and others to be able to provide that tool set, that flexibility to our customers, right? And there've been a lot of uptick in the demand for this. So I see this personally to be growing quite manifold in the years to come. Yeah.
And Francisco, you were nodding your head when we were talking about, this ongoing partnerships between the global providers and the local providers as well. It's got to be business as usual. Is that what you guys would agree on? That we don't need a complete overhaul of the market. That the future still relies on those partnerships.
I agree. I believe there will be definitely hybrid, and we will need to. Our job will be to make the hybridity of the end state easy to consume for the organizations. That's how I see our job, basically, as a company, to make the consumption of the hybrid model easy for the organization, because it's not easy at all. Like, I think it's very complex, but we have the know-how and the competence. Our job is to make it, but the ecosystem will be hybrid. Yeah, in great numbers.
All right. I don't know. We're in the dying seconds now of the session. Is there anything that anybody wants to say finally in the last few seconds of this session?
Yeah, I would like to insist on the European size of the market and the European that we have to unite the companies in Europe, because sovereignty, I mean, used to be for a country, but now we mostly talk about European sovereignty. And I think things like we are waiting for AUCS at the European level, which is a new certification scheme which we wait for. But I think it's all together with our values that we're going to be a real choice for the market.
Thank you very much. Well, sadly, Savannah, we must leave it there now. My thanks to all of you for joining us, and my thanks to Red Hat for hosting us today. Thanks to the audience as well, and thanks for your questions. So for now, goodbye.
Thanks to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.